Hi, everyone.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome to Tuesday Night Masterclass, where Chris and I are talking about one of our favorite topics, marshmallows.
Marshmallows are one of my favorite topics. I especially like them when the marshmallow topic is coupled with a graham cracker topic and a piece of chocolate topic.
So, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like piece of chocolate topics are really important to pair with marshmallow topics. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Actually, tonight we are just going to be talking about s'mores.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you guys have showed up for tonight. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is a discussion about warm confectionaries.
That's right. That's right. Per usual.
Yeah, right.
Um,
As always.
So, what we are actually going to talk about tonight here at the Endurance Schools Masterclass is how to focus on process instead of outcome goals. And one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this up now is because in this period where races are being rescheduled and goals are really they're murky. They're not totally solid. This can be a great time to really shift your focus to process goals and to that process. And we're going to talk a little bit about why and how to do that. If you are unsure of the allusion that we've been making to the marshmallows, then a little bit of background on that. We are referring to the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment, which was done in 1972 by a psychologist named Walter Mischel. Michelle?
Initial.
Let's go with Michel.
Yeah.
And it was a study on delayed gratification where they offered a child a choice between one small but immediate reward, a marshmallow, or two small rewards if they waited for a period of time, two marshmallows. The researcher would then leave the room for about 15 minutes and come back and see whether or not the kid ate the marshmallow. The interesting thing about this study is that the results indicated exactly the opposite of what the researchers predicted when they started it. Instead of the rewards serving as a cue for the possible delayed rewards, they actually, hi, Cher. They actually indicated that not thinking about a reward makes it easier to delay gratification. So, like, averting your focus away from the goal made it more likely that you would actually be able to attain that goal. And that is one of the reasons why we are here today.
Yes, we are not simply going to be talking about candy.
Not just candy.
We are actually going to be talking about how we take that study and take it over to endurance training and racing. Unsurprisingly, because we're the endurance school and that's what we do. So we want you guys to think about your outcome goals as marshmallows. And outcome goals can take a huge number of roles in endurance training. So it can be as simple as like, I want to go do an Olympic distance triathlon and I want to get like a 220 for my time. So that's a very clear outcome goal. It's a time goal. Other things that occur for outcome goals is focusing on a certain place. So I want to get on the podium, or a certain reward. And we're going to talk about some of the big rewards in our sport that come later. But like, oh, I want this thing, or I want this prize, or I want this award that I will get if I have, quote, success. And from what Molly just summarized, that if you're focusing on the reward, that's actually just going to lead you to more frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And frustration in a racing and training context, it's completely not pertinent to what you're actually trying to focus on, which is the execution of the thing that you're trying to do. When Molly and I were talking about this beforehand, we were talking about sometimes you go to a race and you might not even know that you were like racing. This happens in cyclocross all the time. In cyclocross, there's usually 5 or 6 categories on the field at once. It's pretty confusing. You might not even be sure of where you are, and it's really, really hard. So people just tend to focus on their effort. And 9 times out of 10, like somebody finishes up and someone comes over and like pins a medal on them or something, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know where I was. That's really cool." Because they weren't focused on on that reward. And so they didn't have those frustrations come in. So we want to get away from marshmallow goals. We want you to start taking that word outcome goals and sub in marshmallow goals for it. You can, if one of your outcome goals is beating other athletes, we want you to start thinking about your competitors as giant fluffy marshmallows. And your goal is not to chase them down and eat them.
Do not eat your competitors.
Don't do that. That will lead to a really bad outcome. Instead of trying to focus on that, we want you to focus on what we're going to spend most of the rest of the time talking about, is process. And so why is process even important in the first place? It puts you in the driver's seat. Focusing on process allows you to focus on the things that are under your control instead of leaving your goals open to outside influences. So, you know, like the things you can't control weather, you can't control who shows up, you can't control conditions, all of that stuff. And those of you that came to Brian Baxter's talk or have done any of his modules know that there's a really limited number of things that are under your control. But you can control your own effort, you can control your own preparation, and you can control your response to what's going on around you. So a big fluffy marshmallow that you think probably shouldn't passes you. Like, what do you do with that reaction? Do you like bear down and go and like try to eat that marshmallow? Or do you like get back to focusing on your process and your effort, which is under your control?
Mm-hmm. The other thing to remember with that is that fine-tuning your approach to training and racing to focus on process lets you really see progress and continual progress in the metrics that actually matter. So like Chris said, if you get passed by a marshmallow out on the race course, let's say you do end up eating that marshmallow and you end up beating them. If your end goal is to get onto a podium, that person who you beat in that race doesn't have any effect on whether or not that's going to lead you towards your end goal when it comes to the race that you're really focusing on. In fact, what you're practicing is allowing yourself to get so results oriented and goal oriented that you're taking yourself out of the process, and practicing that is going to make it much less likely that you're going to achieve those goals, because every time you eat the marshmallow, you make it less likely that you'll be able to take your head out of that spiral and get yourself back to a place where you can really focus on your own performance. The metrics that matter too, like are you getting stronger? Are you getting faster? Are you developing mastery in your sport? Those are the ways that you see continual progress and improvement. Focusing on those outcome goals is not the way that you're going to get faster. The other thing, sorry, what were you going to say, Chris?
I was gonna ask you. What are some of like shorter term metrics? You know, so like developing mastery and all that stuff. Like those are like really, but focusing on some of those stuff about like how are you actually improving? Like what are some ways that we track that kind of like smaller window metric improvement? Like what are the ways that we know that our training is working?
So one of the things that I have been really interested in lately, especially since a lot of my athletes are riding on trainers, is what happens when they go outside to their variability index. So seeing whether or not they are continually cycling while they are out on their bicycles. If their VI is like 1.12, it indicates that there's something getting lost along the way there. If it's not somewhere in a more acceptable range, like 1 to 1.05-ish, then I think that there are things that you can do to get speed and to squeeze speed out of mastery. By focusing on mastery and focusing on pedaling downhill and not coasting when it's not safe, or when it's safe to not coast. Always safety first, but when you're focused on squeezing performance out of the moments that you can, then I think that's one metric that you can start to pay some attention to. What about you, Chris? What are the ones that you watch for that?
Let's see. So. Yeah, I love that you bring up variability index, because like that's one of those metrics that like kind of hides inside Training Peaks. And it's really cool. It's like, it's one of those metrics that we usually go and look at, like when we're looking at a race. And a lot of the time, like a lot of those little metrics up in the top right corner, there's a lot of athletes that are like, oh my God, I didn't even know what this means. You know, there's two up there one that I look at probably more than others, but they're both pretty linked. So there's the power to heart rate measure of how much it splits the workout into two, and then basically measures how much your power and your heart rate, if you're on the bike, or your pace and your heart rate are splitting apart over the course of a steady state workout. Ideally, hopefully, if they're paying attention to their variability index, a race is a steady state workout. And so seeing that pace to heart rate or power to heart rate percentage is below 5%, that's something that I tend to look at with athletes. And I'll look at those if they've got like a steady state run or a steady state, bike run. So like something without a lot of intervals. And hopefully if we look at those like over time, those should get better as an athlete is getting fitter. If they're not getting closer to being under 5%, then we know that we're not actually generating more fitness. We're not making them more efficient. And then another one over there that is very similar is the efficiency factor number. That one's got a little more problems to it, but if you can do apples to apples, like if you can get them to do a similar run over the course of a few weeks or a similar ride, you can look and be like, okay, efficiency factor is going up. That's good. That means that we're getting more output for the same heart rate. And astute listeners will notice that that this is the reason why I'm always like, please wear your heart rate strap, everybody. Because I think people get focused on, especially for both the bike and the run, they get focused on the output numbers. They get focused on pace and power, versus the effort numbers. I guess on the bike it would be more that they get focused on speed instead of power. Right. But people also do really get focused on like their power output as like an ego thing. Yep. It's nothing to do. Yeah. But yeah, no, I the only reason I asked that is because like our goal of developing mastery is awesome, but sort of like the stuff that we're talking about like breaking it down into smaller bits, like just identifying some of those like smaller improvements over time. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, like you said, get caught up in one goal, in one metric, whether it is FTP or run threshold or, how much time they spend, or they're like 1 minute power. Like they get wrapped up in something, and lose the big picture in the focus on the myopic focus, I guess. But yeah, I think that paying attention to these indicators that determine your skill level and your execution level are really important. I think another one that people get really into is all of those metrics that you get from Garmin about swim, the like SWOLF number, don't listen to that number. That number doesn't know you. That number doesn't know you. That number is going to make you less efficient, less flexible, less connected to anything that helps. It's like when we were talking to Sean last Friday when he talked about the magic of like marathon day. Where he was like, "That's the only day that you do that." Right. Like everything else is like a little puzzle piece that then in the end, like on race day, you get to like step back and finally admire the thing. But trying to I think one of the things we're talking about is like, you can't put the puzzle together all at once. Right. Exactly.
I think the other thing to remember with that too is that the thing is whatever the best race that you have in you, whatever the best race you have in you on that given day, like that should be the goal. The goal, the thing I really loved about George when we had him on a couple weeks ago was his statement. And I had this in my head while I was racing the PDX Tri because, like, I'm not like the world's most competitive athlete, but like I like to do well and like I like to, go out and race. And it was hard to race not knowing how anyone else was going to do. Like it wasn't like where I was relative to the rest of the field. And like, that's not usually something that I think I'm focused on, but it was definitely something that I was aware of while I was out racing by myself. And I kept hearing George in my head about like, thinking about if he's not going to win, then the person who is going to win is going to have to work really hard for it and like make them really work for it. And that for me was really motivating, just to keep getting as much as I could out of myself, to try to like think about how it was going to, if I wasn't going to win, the person who did was going to have to work really hard for it. And my definition of win is very different from some people. I'm not trying to win overall.
Yeah, you were still close. For those of you that don't know, Molly was third overall in PDX Drive.
That does not usually happen to me. Some people stayed home.
But I mean, like, I think, talking about virtual racing, like, gives us this amazing time to actually focus on process instead of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, all of the trappings of outcome, like you were just saying, are just kind of, like, stripped away.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you didn't even know who that person was that was going to have to work for it.
Right.
And so the only way that you could make them work hard was by doing as best as you possibly could. Which is, I think, like one of the great gifts of this virtual period is like, when Amy and I did the Spring Classic Half Marathon, we just went out to Sophie Island and we're like, okay, like, we're just going to run like a 13.1 mile time trial.
Mm-hmm.
At the award ceremony, like the guy who ended up third, he like went and looked at the results and he said, he was like, oh, like Chris started really slow and then finished really fast. And he's like, I started really fast and I like faded in the very end. And the difference was only 7 seconds. And it's one of those things that, like, if we had been racing together, we would have been more conscious of each other.
Mm-hmm.
But since we weren't, it was really just it was like a true time trial where you just went out and did your best. And I think this was your experience with PDX trial.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, then you get to sort it out later. So it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, like, as difficult as this period is right now, it's really giving people a chance to see what it feels like to focus on process.
Absolutely. And it lets you really remember the sport that we participate in, because your FTP is not going to determine your ability as a triathlete. Another story for anecdotes purposes. So one of the first races that I did, the Staten Island Flat as a Pancake sprint distance triathlon, one of my coaches raced, and the woman in my age group who won my age group was second overall, and he got first overall in that race. And she beat him in the swim, the bike, and the run, but he out-transitioned her. And I think that is, I mean, that's a perfect example of why you don't focus just on outcome, on just trying to like be the fastest cyclist, have the, focus on those types of goals. You have to remember everything that goes into the race that we participate in.
The other thing that focusing on process is going to really do, and now I'm really talking more about focusing on process in a workout rather than focusing on process in a race. But it allows you to resist the temptation to think about every workout as a prediction of your future success or future failure. I think we've all had that moment where we've gone out and we've had a workout that really didn't go according to plan, and you're like, oh my God, what does this mean? like, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do the thing that I want to do. Or conversely, you could have a workout where you absolutely like hit it out of the park, and you can derive some perhaps false self-confidence from that particular result. Workouts are a place to practice your Buddhism. If you have a bad result, like, it's going to pass. If you have a good result, it's also going to pass. But it really doesn't matter what is going on with any individual workout. It's the process. Because the thing that people forget there's a few things that people forget when they focus on either the negative or the positive implications from a bad or a good workout. The first thing to forget in is the amount of time that is still remaining between then and their event. Like, I've had people like 8 weeks out from a race be like, oh no, how in the world am I going to be able to do it? And you're like, well, you're just going to keep training for the next 8 weeks, and you're going to improve. You just have to have the faith in that process that will occur, and not get basically, don't let your focus get pulled away, and you'll start making mistakes. So they forget to account for the time that they still have to grow. This is back to the old fixed mindset, growth mindset thing. Like, you have a bad workout, you think that that's who you are as an athlete, versus that's who you are right now, and you can grow in to something else. The other aspect of focusing on the outcome of a particular workout that sort of leads you into a not helpful way of thinking. Let's see, help me out here, Molly. I totally just blanked.
Do you want me to jump ahead with what I was about to jump in with while you figure out what you were going to say?
Let's see. I know that, yeah, I don't know. This goes to the old saw that a lot of the athletes that I work with hear a lot, that you really can't treat workouts as rehearsals. They're merely building blocks along the way. Mm-hmm. And if you're focused on a particular outcome, if you think an outcome is an arbiter of who you are as an athlete, you're not giving yourself the freedom to develop more mastery. You're not allowing yourself a chance to grow. But yeah, jump into the next bullet point, and
okay.
And I will see if I can remember what the other thing was that I had to say on that front.
We also have some cool stuff to talk about further down the line about the difference, like mindset and outcomes and all that stuff. So that might be part of it. But the other thing that I was going to say, and this is for any of my fellow evaluation nerds out there, and I know you're out there because anybody who dives into their Training Peaks is at their heart an evaluation nerd. But process evaluation is important. Fidelity evaluation is part of that. And what I mean by that is, how do you go out and actually participate in the training that you said you were going to participate in? I've had a lot of athletes tell me, I'm really disappointed in my race performance because in training I ran a 10-minute mile, but then in the race I ran a 12-minute mile. And I feel like I trained the way I was supposed to train, and I ran the pace I was supposed to run, and then it didn't show up on race day. But then you look back at their training, and yeah, maybe they did run a 10-minute mile on their long runs for that marathon training, but they were also stopping for a couple minutes to stretch, or stopping to go to the bathroom, or stopping to pull something out of their sock. And how many times you stop, and how much you're trying to replicate the conditions of race day, if not the expectations of race day, are actually important. So are you training the way that you hope to race? Are you practicing that mindset of every time something goes a little bit wrong, I'm not going to stop, and I'm going to see how much I can push through and see if this is something that will pass or if it's something that I actually need to deal with. But when you go back and look at an athlete who maybe had a 10-minute mile over 20 miles, so that's 200 minutes, which would be, oh my God, mathing is 3 hours.
3:20.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's so late. 3 hours and 20 minutes. But if that run took them 4.5 hours, they were not running a 10-minute mile. So it's that fidelity to your workout is important, and that's another thing to keep in mind in this whole process fiasco.
Yeah.
Did you figure out what you were going to say?
No, but it's fine. I think nobody needs to hear me go on about workouts versus as rehearsals again. I do plenty of that.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what you're talking about right now with the fidelity matters is also that, like, just like basically the details of your process matter, of like, of remaining focused on like the little things and knowing that the little things add up. So yeah, I mean, like those like 4 or 5 trips to the bathroom, like that stuff adds up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the stopping the watch on the run is one that, that I'm always like, no, like leave that running. Like we need to know how long this actually took you.
And we can see it even if you don't.
It's true. Yeah, there's big gaps in the file. Yeah. It's a easy detective story. So Molly, what do we do though about goals where outcomes really seem to matter? And like the big one that jumps to mind in our sport is qualifying for golf.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there are situations. In fact, on with his beer mile question. Sometimes people are racing for outcomes. They're racing for a qualification, for a podium, for a prize finish. There are times when outcomes may be like the hoped for overall goal. But I think that not like we were talking about before with the marshmallow study, the thing that seems to be the most effective for psychology is to not focus on that overall goal and to make that overall goal the focus of your training. The more that you can distract yourself from that and focus on what you do have control over, the more you're likely to see some positive movement. So like, first thing that I would recommend for folks who are hoping to have an outcome goal or to achieve an outcome goal is to break that outcome up into the pieces that you need in order to arrive at that moment equipped for the challenge at hand. So figure out what it is you need from, for a Kona race or for a Kona qualifier. Do you need to swim between 60 and 65 minutes? What does your threshold pace need to be in order to, or what does your CSS need to be in order to swim that fast? What are the things that you're going to see in training that are going to make it more likely that you are moving towards those goals? If you need to bike 5.5 hours to go or to get yourself a Kona qualifier, then what do you need to see or what do you need to do before then? Do you need to focus on bike speed? Do you need to focus on what kind of power output you have? Do you need to focus on bringing your threshold pace down so that you can run a faster marathon off the bike? Do you need to focus on running off the bike? Figure out where those points are that you can stand to achieve, and go with the low hanging fruit first. Make those bigger, grab those apples first, and make those changes that you're going to see big impacts. So I think the more that people see improvement, the more they're bought into the process. So go with the things that you're more likely to see improvement in first. Along those same lines, like evaluate your current strengths and weaknesses, figure out where your limiters are, your personal limiters, and address those ones first. Maybe you are an absolute demon on the bike, and you don't need to change the way that you're riding, but you may need to run faster than someone who's, maybe you don't need to run as fast as the person who's going to run the fastest marathon, but you need to run fast enough to get that Kona qualifier. So work on your limiters first. And then finally, those big long-term goals and those big like once in a year race goals, those can be a lot of pressure. So break up the big goal into small goals and figure out what the small goals that you need to achieve along the way are.
Yeah, I always remember, Mark Allen talking about his Kona preparation, and he said he would always say that like there was like an 8-month of the year period that got him ready to do the 3 months of work that would make him ready to race and come.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that way of thinking about it, because like the athlete that is focused on the outcome looks at the race day first, and and is like, and then kind of like and they put all of that pressure on themselves like right off the bat. And I think the thing that you see from the athletes that really have a lot of success at any level is that they start small and just keep building on their successes. Like in like what you're saying about like where your strengths and weaknesses are, that athlete probably is like, okay, I need to be able to swim 65 minutes. My last Ironman, I swam 121. That's the obvious place. And like, okay, I'm going to start there. And thinking about it as like signposts or benchmarks along the way, that eventually get you into a place where you can make that final step into the goal, the success that you want.
Absolutely.
But Molly, so I'm an inveterate perfectionist.
Oh, that's right.
So, and you know that, like this from working with me.
That's right.
And so it's really hard for me to go out and do these workouts, and I really want them to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, so you are not alone, Chris. A lot of people feel that way. A lot of athletes feel that way. A lot of endurance athletes feel that way. There's some interesting research out there, and I was a little bit surprised to see this, but there is some interesting research out there that striving for perfection in your athletic achievements is actually positively associated with goal achievement.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's so great. So I should just keep focusing on being perfect.
So there's a but there. I know. This is the bummer part of that. Striving for perfection is positively associated with goal achievement, but negative reactions to imperfection are not. In fact, they make it less likely that you will achieve your goals. So when they asked a group of high school athletes, like questions that tried to get at whether or not they were perfectionists, the athletes who were perfectionists, who strive for perfection in their training and racing, that did seem to be beneficial for them in goal achievement. But if they were hard on themselves for being imperfect, if they were stressed out about an imperfect training session or an imperfect race, if they allowed, this is a big one I think for a lot of us, if they allowed the small things that went wrong to detract from the overall success of an event, that was negatively associated with goal achievement. So perfectionism, sure. Being hard on yourself when you're not perfect, not good. Negatively associated with mastery.
And the whole reason that we launched this whole endurance school thing was an attempt to improve people's mastery, right?
That's right. That's exactly why we're here.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm going to use this little jumping off point to mention one of my favorite books, The Brave Athlete. There is, if you have not had a chance, people out there, to check this book out and have a look through it, there's actually a whole section about self-worth, because the things that Molly is talking about right now are really self-worth questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you find yourself basically unmanned or unwomaned by imperfections in your training or racing, they're probably they could be rooted in some self-worth stuff. And there's one of the first exercises in this book takes you through a checkup for your self-judgment system. It sounds a little tough, sounds a little harsh, especially in the self-worth section, but it's a really good idea for everybody, not just athletes, to kind of go through this to get a sense of where you stand about thinking about yourself. Because this isn't just going to have implications in your training and racing. This is going to have implications in your life. These are not things that your coach can probably help you with. if any red flags do pop up when you do an exercise like this, it's probably time to seek some real professional help, and we would really urge people to take that route. But just going to run through these. These are on a rubric of like a completely true, mostly true, somewhat true, false, mostly false, and completely false. So you have 5 options. It's not just a binary yes no. And there's 6 questions. And I could disappear from the surface of the earth and nobody would notice or care. I feel worthless and useless. I will never amount to anything or anyone significant. I don't deserve to be loved and respected. I constantly ask those I care about whether they love me. I think I'm a failure. I hate to be a buzzkill. Those are 6 like really tough, really searching questions. Hopefully for most of you, those land in the completely false section. But I would suggest that you go and pick this book up and kind of run through this, because if you see some red flags there, you are definitely going to experience some of the stuff that Molly was just talking about. That if you have some imperfections in your training or racing, you might find and you're having negative reactions to them. That might be some triggers for some self-worth stuff, which will be negatively associated with your development of mastery.
Mm-hmm. That's right. A really nice quote from that study that I mentioned before, which is a little nerdy, but I think sums it up really well, is regarding theoretical implications. They provide further support for the view that striving for perfection does not have to be a source of stress and distress, but may be part of a healthy pursuit of excellence and may be associated with adaptive outcomes if self-worth is not made contingent on success or failure to achieve perfect results. Remember that, athletes. Remember that.
Yeah, I love that you found that quote. That's such a great sum up of like everything that we try to do.
I'm gonna write it on a Post-it and stick it to the mirror.
Yeah.
It's long.
All right, Molly. So why let's bring this full circle here. Why should we resist the marshmallow?
Because it's not just about the process for training. One of the big takeaways from that study, that Stanford study on the marshmallow, is that researchers found in follow-up studies that kids who were not able to resist the marshmallow had more adverse life outcomes. They scored lower on SAT tests. They had higher health adversity. They did not achieve as much educational attainment. I will note here that the researcher in me needs to say that this was somewhat confounded by socioeconomic status. About 50% of the effect that they found was confounded by socioeconomic status, but that is some amount. That is not all of the amount. And what that implies is that your ability to focus on process and to delay gratification and to delay to distract yourself from reward has benefits for your life outside of training and racing. So like as Chris has often said, this is a place that we come to kind of fight our battles in a controlled environment and to see success and improvement. And we hope that goes beyond your training and racing, that's something that you can really apply to your everyday life. And we really think that focusing on process and trying to give yourself the ability to step back from self-criticism and outcome goal attainment will have big impacts on your life and on all of our lives outside of the race course.
Yeah. I mean, this is the way that we try to help get to the happier equation of the faster and happier athletes. You know,
that's right.
Like ideally, by focusing on process in all of your training and racing, it bleeds out into the rest of your existence. Not just the nice things that you get from training and racing.
That's right. And
do we have any questions out there?
Yeah. Do you guys want to talk about marshmallows some more?
While we're waiting for some of those questions to stream in here, I think you're with me for morning routine tomorrow.
Accurate.
The schedule is, Molly and I are really starting to lose track of the schedule.
No idea what day it is.
But yes, you're with me tomorrow morning for a morning routine. We have Swim Fit tomorrow afternoon. Thursday morning, you're with me for Supperfest. And then Thursday afternoon, you are with Amy VT for Thursday afternoon yoga, which is always awesome. Once again, we are going to have some schedule announcements coming up in the next day or so. So stay tuned. We'll have some more information on that front.
Chris, Cher had a question earlier about stopping your watch at a light.
That's I go either direction on that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I sort of look at the traffic, and if I can tell it's going to be like a 10 to 15 second stop, I don't stop the watch. If it looks like I'm going to be there for like 30 seconds or more, I go ahead and stop the watch in that case. But yeah, if it's just a little stop, I try. It's a chance for here's the reason I do that. It's an opportunity for me not to be neurotic. And I know that given the chance, I will be neurotic, that I will be kind of obsessive about it. And so it's a little opportunity for me to let that go and be like, that doesn't matter. Once it's getting over like 30 seconds and getting up to like a minute or so, it's like, okay, well, this is sort of materially changing what's going on with this, the data of this workout. So I'm gonna stop the watch. If it's in a warm up, I don't stop the watch. I don't care.
So I started running in New York City and in Brooklyn specifically, and so stoplights were a real part of my life. I did do a lot of like running around a block or finding like, if you're in an area where you don't have to cross that intersection, if you can keep going or if you can backtrack a little bit and just keep moving. I've done a lot of that because otherwise, as a New Yorker, I would never have a continual run. I would always be stopped waiting for a refrigerator truck to unload and then leave. So that's another option. But again, like it's one that sometimes you're stopped and that sometimes that's okay. If it is going to be just a couple seconds, then I agree. I try to let it go, just to derail the neuroses. But if it's going to be a longer stop, then I think it's kind of up to the athlete. And that's also not a stop you choose. Although sometimes I am delighted by a red light.
Yeah, sometimes it's really nice.
Yeah.
Another way to free yourself of that is a few runs where you leave the watch at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when you don't have the watch to stop, you suddenly realize like that it's all just fabricated anyway. It's all this just like fabricated like collected time, and really it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, sometimes I think it is really helpful for a few weeks out of the year is to go data blind and like not take the watch with you, leave the bike computer at home. I mean, none of you guys take your watches to the pool anyway, so I don't even need to say that. Just it can really help return like your sense of like, the reason I'm going on this run is for a run. I'm not going on this run to collect data.
Yeah. The also nice thing about the leaving your watch at home, especially for the swim, is that then you get to implement the other secret weapon of race day surprise, which is nobody knows anything about you. Like if they've been watching your Strava and like you've been putting up the total amount of time that you were in the pool and you're super chatty, which I definitely am, especially if it means I don't have to push off the wall. Then like nobody knows you. It's a really exciting thing to do.
Yeah.
That's right, Enid. If it's not on Strava, it didn't really happen. That's right.
I gotta find some way of turning all those sayings around.
If it is on Strava, it didn't really happen.
Yeah, it actually
there's something to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's on Strava or Garmin, it's not IRL.
Right. The IRL training. Awesome. Well, I think that brings us about to the end of our marshmallow spiel. So I'm really appreciative of you guys coming and joining us for this. This is a really fun thing to talk about, and it's exciting to get to see people focusing on the important stuff instead of on the stupid stuff.
Yeah, this is awesome. This goes to the heart of everything that Molly and I are trying to do with the company is, develop people's mastery. And that's we really want to see you guys developing that and not getting into those negative implications of those negative associations with workouts that don't go very well. There's one thing in here that we thought about talking about and then deleted it, but like a workout that doesn't go well is an opportunity, and changing your mindset to that, I think, is one of the big takeaways that we really want you to have from this discussion. This was super fun. We hope you guys had fun too. We will see you here, and we will also see you IRL, probably more and more in the near future, we hope. In the meantime, if there's no other news to put out, here's to a happier and faster tomorrow, everybody.
Thanks for coming, guys. It's really wonderful to get to spend this time with you. Bye.